Saudi Arabia is now looking to join BRICS. So BRICS, if people don't know, it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. These are the different national powers internationally that are coming together and forming a coalition to change the world reserve currency. Now, Saudi Arabia, as we already all know, it exports oil to a bunch of different nations, and you have all the BRICS countries. They're also exporting different resources to other nations. So they have they're able to stabilize their current economy with exports to other nations, developed nations, and also developing nations. Now, why is there a separate coalition that does not include the Western Front, and they're coming together and they want to change the world reserve currency? Well, when you have these different powers, they're trying to find opportunity that they can leverage, and changing the world reserve currency is a way for them to leverage whatever's happening in the world. In this case, we have America using the US dollar as the world reserve currency. For the longest time, Saudi Arabia has been taking the US dollar, doing all their transactions in the US dollar, because America was backing Saudi Arabia when it came to conflict. Now that Saudi Arabia, which they've done extremely well within the past few decades, they don't really have any conflicts that are overtly challenging them. They feel a way to, everyone wants opportunity over America. Okay, America is like the world superpower, the world police. We have the highest standard of living. We have the highest GDP. We have the biggest military. We typically have had a stable political regime up until now. I mean, there have been periods of time where the political regime is not stable and there's internal strife because there's different factions of power that are trying to take over each other. Whenever that happens, other nations, historically speaking, China, Russia, other nations, they would see that as opportunity and come in to, like a shark, take their bite at what was going on and overtake America in terms of GDP, standard of living, colonization, such and so forth. Now, this does not fare well for Americans in the future, 50, 100, 150 years. We don't really know when this transition of power will happen. We can say that we're living through it. There's always a transition happening. Empires come and go. Oftentimes, I've said this before, but if people want to look this up on YouTube, you can type in a timeline of all the empires that have come and gone within the past 3,000 years. And it's a really cool timeline. It's sped up a little bit. So you can see all the way back from, let's say, 1000 BC, all the way to, or BCE, all the way to 2000 CE. So that's 3,000 years before Common Era, all the way to Common Era. And you'll have all these empires come and go, different changing of names, different borders being drawn. This happens during people's lifetimes. They don't really notice it. I mean, it's a gradual thing. If you look at a timeline, it looks quick, especially if you look at Germany during World War II. It came and went really quick. But all of these transitions of power, empires coming and going, kingdoms coming and going, this happens gradually throughout our lifetime. There's always, humans intrinsically want power, wealth, influence, status, resources, labor. You take that and you scale it and you magnify it on an international level. You're going to have people who try to find every opportunity to change something in their favor. In this case, it's a world reserve currency. Saudi Arabia is now, if they were to join BRICS, you'll have China who's coming in. They have the most leverage right now. They want to change the world reserve currency to the yuan. Okay, that's the currency that is they use in China. If that overtakes America's US dollar, what happens? Right now, we print a ton of money. Other countries use our money in transactions, so there's a lot of circulation of the US dollar. And because of that, we're able to take our dollar and not feel inflation as much. Other nations will feel it more so. And because other nations in their local currencies are inflated to hell, they have to use the US dollar because that is relatively more stable than their local currency. We're able to fund our military, have a strong, stable political system relative to other nations, have the highest GDP, have entrepreneurship and businesses. A lot of the innovative businesses come out of the United States of America. We export entertainment. All of that is changing. Once it goes into the yuan, once we lose our world reserve status, well, we're going to feel inflation a lot more. Our standard of living is going to take a hit and it's going to go down. You have other countries who, I won't say that they're going to come in overtly and colonize us. They do have political and cultural subversion, which they're doing right. They've been doing that for decades. But that's more of a covert stance. Overtly, it won't be like they come here and they colonize us like we would in the imperialist days. But they're going to have a stronghold on America, and America is going to have to bend the knee to a lot of situations that China presents itself with in the future. Again, I don't know when it'll be, 100, 200 years. We don't really know. We're not going to be here to see that come about. This is more of a legacy building a long-term thinking point of view for Russia and China and even Saudi Arabia, whereas our American politicians are thinking very short-term, 2, 4, 8 years, because that's when they get elected, they have to run campaigns. So they don't really care about what happens to America long-term. Because they don't care about what happens to America long-term, they sacrifice America, they sell America out through different interests, to other nations even, because they benefit, and they know that they're going to live 20, 30 more years, and they want to enjoy their lives and have everyone around them be fruitful. But America loses. We have Putin and Xi, these are the leaders of Russia and China, they're coming together and saying, our nations, the next 100 years, the next 200 years is going to be insane, what we're building here. These people are not going to be alive for that. They're going to live 20, 30 more years, but they're thinking long-term about the legacy. And so when you put your nation first, and you're thinking about how to not just make yourself prosperous and the people around you, but the whole nation prosperous, you're creating a culture that is in this for the long term. You're prioritizing your people first. When you have our leaders, our American leaders who are really criminals that have been compromised, our American leadership has been compromised by criminals. That's a better way of saying it. And this is, let's say, 60, 70% of them. There are still some good people out there, but they just don't have enough power to balance it out. The balance is totally skewed. These people don't care, and that's why America is losing. That's why we're seeing a bunch of our population lose. They're obese, they're mentally unfit, we're encouraging mental illness, we're not protecting our kids, we're not protecting our children. We're seeing the degradation of our rights. They're getting watered down dramatically because these rights can be sold out for more power, more interests behind the scenes. If we lose a world reserve currency, if we lose our stable politics, or the way we govern this entire system, if we lose our military, and that's not just overt, like covertly we have to have a military. We have to be able to fight espionage and fight different ways of cultural subversion. China, Russia does it. This is all an information war through propaganda. When that propaganda hits American citizens and American citizens are falling for it, and American leaders who are compromised are also spreading the propaganda in favor of these other nations or to fuel certain interests that don't help America or American citizens long term, that's when we lose. So when we understand all the pieces of the puzzle and we're able to put the puzzle together, we can see how what's happening in the East is very different than what's happening in the West. And it's not just America, it's England, it's Italy, it's France. All of these nations have become so weak and so soft. We used to be at the height of humanity. And what that afforded us was 40-hour work days, 40-hour work weeks, a nice weekend, a nice 9 to 5 where you can be in a cool office building. Obviously, you have some people who are laborers. People make a decent amount. They can afford cars. They can, even though it's on credit, they can finance cars. They can finance homes. You can live a pretty good lifestyle compared to anywhere else in the world you go. For most of the world, they don't have plumbing. They don't have running water. They actually have more access to cell phones than they do toilets, I believe. If you go in a lot of places of the developing world, we are living substantially better than them. And that is only afforded to us by certain invisible hands behind the scenes. We don't really see it overtly, but we see it when we transact. We realize we have individual rights. We can transact freely. We can work for a living wage. We're able to get cheap resources. We're able to outsource productivity and bring it and still benefit from the rewards of that, benefit from the fruits of that labor. When we don't see that, we take all this for granted, and we let other people come in who see an opportunity and take our lunch. And so I'm just saying all this because when we have to bend the knee to China or Russia in the future, let's take a look at their civilizations. They don't value individual rights as much as America has historically valued individual rights. So when these other powers gain more power and America has to submit to them, our individual rights by proxy will be degraded even more so than by our own politicians here at home right now. And when you realize that, we are going to slowly lose our freedom of speech. Okay, so that's assembly, speech, the right to petition our government, religion. Those rights are going to go out the window. Due process is going to go out the window. The right to keep and bear arms is going to go out the window. All of these rights that we take for granted, we don't realize how we use these rights every single day. Even though we have unconstitutional laws that are enacted on us all the time, we don't realize how much better we have it here than in other nations. Even though China and Russia care about their nations long term, a vast majority of their population they're not afforded the same rights that we have here. They can't speak out against their government. I mean, they could, but there are negative consequences to that. Over here, there are starting to be consequences because you have a power structure who is run by criminals at the top and they want to go after people. But by our founding documents and by the minority of people here who still enforce what's in that document of the Constitution, we have the ability to have certain inalienable rights that no one should be able to take away from us, so long as we're willing to stand up for them. And so this is a long-term view of how to see the world. A lot of people may not care. A lot of people may say, you know what, I'm not going to be alive in 50 years to see this. Why does it matter to me? It matters based off legacy. It matters that you leave this world a better place than when you were here. It matters that if you're going to have kids, daughters, sons, you make this place, you make this life a better place for them, so that they're educated. They're not, maybe they are hit with propaganda. We're all going to be hit with propaganda, but they can see the truth. They can stand up for what's right, to have individual rights, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. They're able to have prosperous lives. They can start businesses. They can fail. They can be rewarded. They can go through the vast experiences of this existence. If they're just cornered into a box and they have to live, like in some places, even in America, but a lot of places in developing nations, they're born in a city. They do the same job for their whole life. They don't really have any other experiences culturally, intellectually. They don't understand the world at a metaphysical level. And so that's a really sad existence, because part of existing, even if you don't have the physical experiences, is to just understand the world around you, just to understand what's happening in different places and to understand concepts, ideas, ideologies. This is like a whole, it can be overwhelming sometimes when you have a whole mental insurgence of information, of perspective, of a worldview. And then to actually use that and enact it onto the world, to be able to do road trips, to fly from here to there, to you open up shops in different cities all over the nation or all over the world and just go through them, to meet different people, to have different experiences. I mean, I'm really being redundant here, but a lot of people don't have that in the world. And once we start to lose that grasp of, and America's not perfect. America does all kinds of shady stuff, historically speaking, even to protect Saudi Arabia. America has done a lot of shady stuff. So has every other nation in the world. People at the top of hierarchies, they tend to do shady things to preserve power, to preserve their status in the hierarchy. But when we lose the overall concept to other nations who care less than us, that's when we really lose. And we don't know if a republic, a constitutional republic like this will ever exist again, or maybe it will, but it's in 3,000 years. And so for people to suffer for 3,000 years, and I'm kind of, some people will suffer, some people will not. They may just have decent existences. I'm sure there are many people in China and Russia who are, well, for sure we know, they have their life. Some people are really wealthy in China and Russia, but a vast majority of people, they're just in the middle class or below the middle class, and they just have an existence. And so we want people to feel the full range of their rights, and then they can do whatever they want with those rights. But we're only afforded that once we have a stable political system, a high standard of living due to GDP, because we're exporting a lot of resources, even if it's entertainment, a strong military, overtly and covertly, a strong currency, and less manipulation of the economy, markets, and political systems, which we're seeing a lot of. When we see our Congress print trillions of dollars, that inflates the dollar, and it urges other nations to change the world reserve currency. When we get in fights and start conflicts and skirmishes all over the world because politicians at the top are fueling different interests, and they're using trillions of our taxpayer dollars, other nations see that and they say, you're abusing your power as a world superpower. We're not benefiting anything from this. In fact, you're attacking us. And so we're going to come in and find some kind of gap that you're lacking in and exploit it. And that's the truth.